we're going to have Pal Bio. Charlie, are you on screen? Are you coming on screen?
I think I'm on screen.
All right, excellent. And Eric Weddapal will be introducing you, but I just want to say a couple remarks. I mean, you know, we've reached the stage where picks and shovels are very important for this fermentation and alternative protein business or industry or whatever you want to call it. So I put Pow Bio in that category of the people that will succeed regardless of which individual startups don't. And hopefully, you know, the infrastructure, it's going to be, you know, there's less competition for one thing, but if you have a strong technology, then hopefully it's going to be a lot easier to succeed. So anyway, Eric, do you want to make the intro?
Yes, I will. So I'm really excited to introduce Charlie Emrich, because Charlie is working on a problem that I think everybody, you know, who is attending here, and particularly the many startups in the synthetic biology world have, you know, confront. So they develop a really cool prototype. Then the time comes that they need to scale it up and they need to work on fermentation, and they find out that, gee, this is really hard. And a lot of times they just, you know, trying to reinvent the wheel all the time, and it turns out to be, you know, an insurmountable challenge. So one of the things that, you know, and so Charlie has been working on this problem on how do you make fermentation available to startups and others. And his background, he's particularly qualified to do this because his background is, he spent, well, some 10 years now in synthetic biology. And, you know, he started his own company, Allopartis, which we later sold to Novo Enzymes. And now has turned his attention to provide fermentation. And I think what makes Pal Bio particularly interesting is Charlie is working on not becoming, you know, the world's best provider of fermentation services, but actually providing a turnkey package that he can then turn over to startups and others wanting to expand their fermentation capabilities, you know, backed by, you know, the world's best fermentation team. So Charlie, I'll let you tell your story with it.
Thanks so much for the intro, Eric. And thanks everybody for watching. I know it's the end of a long and kind of amazing day. And honestly, following Sonny is a tough act. Sonny, I don't know where you are in the Bay Area. I'm assuming you're in the Bay Area, but I would love to come and get a sample. So like Eric said, I'm Charlie Emrich. I'm co-founder and CEO of Pal Bio. Our mission is to essentially make scale up a lot easier for every company in the world and have a global impact on a lot of the global challenges facing us. So let me share my screen here. And there we go. All right, great. So it's probably telling nobody here anything new, but it predicted that up to half the world's chemicals can come from biology by the year 2040, and up to 60% of the world's physical inputs could go back to being from biology, away from synthetic and petrochemistry. And whether that's in new food, ag tech, advantaged chemicals, existing chemicals, new to nature chemicals, these markets together already make up $150 billion aggregate TAM, and parts of them, you know, particularly food, are poised for explosive growth, which really puts us at the cusp of a revolution in manufacturing. And at the core of all of these biomanufactured products lies fermentation. It's a process that's been with us as long as civilization. And really, we live in a golden age of biology right now. The ability to come up with these great product candidates and screen massive amounts of new variants is really unprecedented, whether that's because of advances in almost push-button DNA synthesis, CRISPR and other genome editing technologies, or high-throughput robotics that are starting to actually look like a factory. There is just a huge wave of products coming down the pipeline ready to become, or product candidates coming down the pipeline ready to become products. But the dirty secret of all of these is that while there's been phenomenal progress made in making high throughput ways of generating these product candidates, the same is not true in fermentation scale-up. So the bottleneck for all of these products is now essentially fermentation capacity. Fermenters are expensive to run, they're very labor intensive, and we're dealing with a very thin labor pool. Anybody who's tried to hire a fermentation scientist or technician knows exactly what I'm talking about. There is not enough capacity out there to really get products to market. And what we've found through customer research is that everybody wants high throughput fermentation so they can test their strains, say the black sheep strains for making these cool branch chain fatty acids, but nobody really has it. Some people try microplates, but while they're cheap, they don't actually give you the same performance that you would get in a manufacturing scale fermenter. Micro fermenters have the same problems, and parallel reactors like Culture Bio and Sartorius's Amber system, which is up here, they are phenomenal and amazingly automated, but it's still $500 to $1,000 per tank to run, and they usually come with 9-month lead times. And so we're still in a situation where there's this huge mismatch, this huge bottleneck of progress in a lot of ways that lands at fermentation. And so what we're doing here at Pow is introducing true high throughput fermentation to explore process optimization to get these fermented products into market, into manufacturing. So we're developing a SaaS system that bolts onto existing trusted bioreactors, things we know scales. It uses AI and sort of dynamical multiplexing, time-based multiplexing to pull about at least 10x more information out of each run than you would have for a typical fermentation. And importantly, it abstracts sort of the expertise layer away from fermentation so that we can push this expertise up into the cloud, recommend processes for you, recommend next steps, and kind of do an end around the labor shortage that we have. And when I say abstracting fermentation, I mean abstracting it into the cloud. The way this would look is you would have a fermenter, the customer at their site would attach a Pow gateway. It would securely connect it up to the cloud. This would be run as a subscription service that would be available either through the web, and we have a beta version of this that should hopefully launch in the next couple of months, and also API access. So you can spend your time analyzing fermentation outcomes rather than analyzing fermentation data and really quickly figure out which candidate is going to scale up and how to develop a manufacturing process to actually scale that up. And even beyond that, where we see this going is developing a system for self-driving fermenters, essentially imbuing the fermentation algorithms with the kind of intelligence that they can creatively explore the fermentation landscape and quickly deliver to you what are the best conditions. And I got a Slack message from one of my junior employees today who said that, today we ran the first kind of algorithmically controlled fermentation, which is super cool. What this means for customers, this entire market of bioproducts, it's not therapeutics, but industrial and synthetic biology. It's all about getting products to market faster. We can measure this for savings for small companies, just in terms of straight burn. For large companies, it's either faster time to peak sales or improve gross margins on the back end. And ultimately, we want to kickstart the next chapter in biomanufacturing. Like I said, this is a SaaS service for automated high throughput fermentation. It'll provide a single pane of glass to unify all of this disparate bioprocess equipment. And we're developing in real time these AI models for fermentation, developed with our own fermentation expertise. So we also, as a way to get in touch with customers, to understand what they need, what they want, we do run a fermentation-as-a-service business so that we can basically amass a ton of data to train models off of. To that end, we launched this in November. We're over $100,000 in received revenue. We have about $250,000 in booked revenue, 6 complete and ongoing projects, and are already up to 2 repeat customers. And are at the point where, we really quickly realized that this is an awesome business. There's a great business here, but to really scale it out to where we have global impact, we need to think about how we scale. And that is the genesis, essentially, of how we turn ourselves into a SaaS company. So During our seed stage, which will be coming up, we're going to be looking at 1 to 2 customers per month for the fermentation-as-a-service, and then targeting about 10 solid mid-size companies so we can tune our go-to-market strategy and, really importantly, learn from our customers as to what is necessary for them. So, and as we grow, we're planning on moving into additional markets such as synthetic meats and biopharma and eventually food and beverage. And we'd like to have this Pow cloud intelligence in every fermenter, all the way from bench scale up to the factory floor. And as we thought about how to scale, also scaling the revenue as a SaaS model makes a lot of sense, simply because a service model is tough, and we're realizing that in every customer engagement. Each single one is different. But as a SaaS model, it allows us to really build our reach and to also build a scalable and successful company. So we're going to be out next month raising the seed rounds with the goal of finishing our MVP, although I think we'll probably end up doing it beforehand, on our self-driving fermenter, building an early access program to this Pow Cloud, also expanding our tech team so we can build features and new verticals, and then continuing the fermentation-as-a-service so that we can keep in touch with the customers and understand what challenges they're facing and what they're doing. For the team, there's myself. So I had a PhD from Berkeley. I've actually worked in miniaturization for all my entire career up to this, and decided that, you know, some problems you can't solve with miniaturization. I think fermentation is one of them. So I founded a company doing directed evolution of protein enzymes. We sold it to Novozymes. I worked there. It's one of the most amazing companies on earth for doing industrial bioprocessing. About 6,000 people, multinational, based outside of Copenhagen. Also, shoring up the operations and commercial side, we have Shannon Hall. She is an executive at Biorad Labs, has managed, launched many products in many verticals. And we have this phenomenal CTO, Owe Wang, who's the originator of some of the technology and a really great, we call him a microbe whisperer. He's just phenomenal with the microbes. We also have a few folks from Zymergen's fermentation team and a phenomenally talented, almost crack team of junior employees from Berkeley's chemical engineering department. Biology is changing the world. I think everybody that has a shot in their arm realizes that biomanufacturing at scale really can change the world. Biomanufacturing is how we are going to change the world. And thanks a lot for your attention. Happy to hear any questions.
Yeah, people should feel free to unmute themselves and come on screen to ask questions if you like. Xavier, do you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know if it's completely off base because I'm not a scientist, but we talked last time about China having 70% of the fermentation capacity in the world. I'd like to hear what Charlie thinks about that. Is it the same type of fermentation? Is that something that can be leveraged in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I am very bullish on increased fermentation capacity. I think there is a crunch, at least in this country. China has a lot of large-scale fermentation capacity, but not every fermenter is the same. And part of this challenge of scaling up is to figure out how to match your process that you're developing in a small-scale facility with that kind of snowflake of a reactor. So in general, I think China having a lot of fermentation capacity and ideally the ability to make more low-cost fermenters for export to the US market would really be fantastic. But I mean, I think fermentation is a great example of a global business, right? If you are going to sell products in Asia, you want to manufacture in Asia, not over here. I think Novozymes had a similar strategy. We had a manufacturing plant in Teta in Tianjin, and then plants in Brazil and Mexico, or in Brazil, Canada, US, and a number of other places as well. So did that answer your question?
I'm curious on that similar to follow up on that question. Is fermentation equipment itself evolving quickly, and who are the market leaders? What countries would be the leaders of that hardware?
Yeah, I mean, Germany is the top one right now. I'd say the pace of innovation in fermentation for industrial scale applications is actually fairly low. Most effort goes into making disposable or consumables for the pharma market, where the margins are a lot higher and they can basically throw money at these problems. There's not a lot of fermentation technology advancements. And part of that, I think, is incentivized by the academic side, where you can get a Nature paper for developing a microbe that makes a branched chain fatty acid, but you can't get a Nature paper for making a fermentation product or fermentation process for that same thing. So I think there is a mismatch. Germany has a lot of the high-end fermenters. There are some from Italy and Spain, and then China has an enormous amount of them. But I talked to, in continued customer outreach, talked to a company that's starting up a sort of foundry model split between the US and China. And the quality of the Chinese reactors is not quite up to snuff. And I think part of that is just the software that runs them is not great. And that's part that we could actually drop in and fix.
Ted, did you have a question?
I did. You know, I know that there's a lot of premium on fermenting premium molecules, proteins, flavors, colors. You know, and you talk about this as a SaaS model. What's the pricing type of range are we talking about?
So base feature set, we're going to look at, we're probably going to launch it initially just with like a fermentation data viewer, because for some reason people the companies aren't very well incentivized to provide something like that. And then moving into the core feature set as $10,000 per tank per year. So it would be a subscription. You'd basically allow us to manage all the data, warehouse the data, and then allow access to all these AIs. And then there are going to be some premium features built on top of that, driven by customer experience, and also probably pricing flexible around the size of the tank. So a production tank would probably command a premium over, significant premium over a bench scale reactor.
So scale and cycle time doesn't play a role.
So for the cycle time, meaning like the fermentation cycle time or
Batch
cycle?
time.
Oh, no, I think an annual license will probably end up making the most sense, just because most of the fermenters that get put into use in at least medium to large size companies just run constantly. Mm-hmm. It's back to this bottleneck that I was trying to hammer home early in it. It's nobody has time. None of these fermentation teams have time to develop new technologies either. They're all overworked. They're all stressed out. And the pace of new stuff coming to them only keeps getting greater and greater.
Yeah. We keep coming up with ideas and we don't have enough places to put them all.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, but can I ask one last question, Charlie? So your term self-driving fermentation was pretty evocative, but is it really so simple? I mean, you know, you also said, for example, that every customer is different, right? Mm-hmm. You know, we were hearing earlier about how every cold chain piece of warehouse is different too. I mean, there's lots of customization, presumably it has to be done. So how self-service can you really make this platform for your customers? And how much handholding are you going to really have to provide them?
Yeah, I'd say for at least the beginning, it probably will require some handholding. It'll depend on the customer sophistication. Ultimately, it depends on the assay. That's how can you tell whether you are making the product that you want and not the things that you don't want. So you don't want co-product formation, you want high titers, and you want it in a space where you can effectively downstream process it and formulate it. So I think for some molecules or some products, it will be relatively straightforward. So these are things like, I'd say the branched chain fatty acids, good example. You can put into a mass spec, make it fly. Some other proteins may be much trickier. Say, like if you are making casein for, I think, setting up new culture later, if you're making casein, it is a tough molecule to assay for. And that's part of the thinking for why to do this as a SaaS rather than a foundry, because the customers will know those assays best and will be best equipped to actually perform them.
Great. Okay, well, I'd love to ask some more questions, but we're out of time, unfortunately. So we're going to have to move on. Terrific and very interesting presentation, Charlie.